Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the second session of the Telecom's Profitability Interest Group for PACE. It's my great pleasure to have Mark Spracklin from CVA Solutions leading this session again. Before we get started, there are a couple housekeeping things I wanted to mention. First is that this session is being recorded for those who can't attend. I also want to mention that we'll be using the chat feature today. So at the bottom of your screen, you can see those three little dots that say more, select chat. And so you can participate. Mark's looking forward to this being an interactive session. We'll be asking some questions and you can be responding in that chat feature. I did want to mention that we do have an interest group on the PACE website, and I'd encourage, if you haven't already, I would encourage you to join the interest group. And I think we have almost 20 people in that group at this point. And those who are members of the interest group, please participate. So this is that's the, it's not a spectator sport. You need to interact, ask questions, share your experiences. So again, we're trying to get a vital interactive community going of those interested in telecom profitability. So without further ado, Mark, please take it away.
Yeah, okay. So this is something I've been doing for a long time now, almost 20 years on and off. When we talk about profitability, it's not just your traditional P&L profitability, but also including lifetime value. Now, I'm not going to go into details about lifetime value, but if anyone wants to know how we do this, I'd be happy to share how we calculate it. But basically, the model is the same, just different parameters. But really, the objective of doing pricing using profitability is to try and increase the profitability long term. So not just looking at profitability of the past, but more looking at the profitability of the future. This is a slide I showed last time, really, about when we're looking at a business, there's these three particular areas that we find. Today, we're really focusing on this one, the customer-facing area, which is about increasing profitability. But I will briefly touch partly on the cost side, because you do have to take that into account. So the people who normally set these prices is marketing. I don't know if anyone's found any other places where people actually do the pricing, but if you want to put a note in the chat, I'll answer those. But in my experience, it normally is driven by marketing. Now, the problem with marketing is, as I found anyway, is they're normally very, very reluctant to use profitability. It's extremely hard to convince them that it's useful. And one of the reasons is that their KPIs normally are about increasing revenues or increasing volumes or subscribers. And normally they're only measured on this year. So they get their bonuses based on this year's KPIs. So they've got no real interest in profitability or even long-term growth of the business. It's all very much this year to get their bonuses. And when I say it's actually the opposite is true, if they were to use profitability, then a lot of these crazy pricing they come up with probably wouldn't fly and wouldn't be approved by the business. So it would actually hurt their bonuses. And the typical marketing playbook is very, very simple. Normally, I have come across some marketing guys who do have smarter strategies, but the normal one is just to reduce the prices, and increase the bundle size. And by bundle size, what I mean is they give you more minutes or more gigabytes or whatever they offer you, more content, more equipment, handsets and things. Just keep adding more and more and more in. But all of those cost money. So generally what happens over time is the profitability goes down. And because they don't monitor that profitability, it can often end up with a lot of problems.
Mark,
now
maybe, I mean, as Raf suggested that we interrupt you as you,
yeah, no,
you speak
please, that's
and
the
ask
idea. Yeah, I
questions.
was going to say if anyone's got any ideas.
Can I maybe, and sorry, I'm coming from data center industry. I have, I'm not so close to, I guess telecom is close, but
Sorry,
not
which
exactly.
industry?
It's a data center industry. So we run data centers.
Okay, well, most telecoms companies, we do data centers as well, yeah.
Yeah, but the question is, I guess, is a bigger question on, why would this strategy, like, why is it accepted by the companies in the telecom industry, whereas, it doesn't create long-term value and it kind of destroys short-term value as well? I mean, is it that those compensation schemes, and I understand, I mean, it's always with salespeople and marketing people, it's always the comp that drives them to do X, Y, or Z. So what, any kind of why at a higher level in the organization, people would not stop that from happening and change their incentive schemes and stuff?
It's mainly the KPIs. And coming back to your question, why do the senior management allow this? I think it's the same sort of thing. Most of them, it's short-term benefits. I mean, for them, their KPIs maybe is the value of the company, the share price or something like that. And that share price might be dependent on the number of subscribers, related to their competition, or it might be ARPU, which is not profitability, but it's still a reasonable measure. So, revenue over subscribers, and it's short term. I'll give you one example. This was in the UK quite a few years ago, but it was, I can say the name, I think it was Vodafone, right? What they did was just before Christmas, because their measure of their subscribers was at the end of the year. Just before Christmas, they sent out loads and loads of free vouchers, top-up vouchers to their prepaid customers who were suspended. So prepaid customers who are suspended are ones that haven't used their phone for quite a while. So these are the worst customers, typically very unprofitable, only use the phone every now and then. They sent out millions and millions of pounds worth of free vouchers, so all these people would start using their phones again, only for one reason: to get the subscriber numbers up so they could hit their targets for the end of the year. I mean, there are some CFOs who do understand that profitability is important. And I'm doing a job currently, I'm on a project for a customer doing this for an operator who do realize this and are thinking long term. But in my experience, a lot of companies just do not think long term.
Okay.
So what's your in the data center then? That they plan for like the 10 years, do they, or something?
Yes. And actually in the industry, in the data center industry, and this is my role actually. I'm not working for this company anymore, but I used to be the commercial finance director. They have this role, which actually is responsible for the pricing. So whenever there is a customer demand, the pricing goes through either is a list pricing, and then it's fine. But then any significant deviation from the list price would come to commercial finance organization for approval, and that's how the company can ensure that the long term is preserved, and the long term financials.
Yeah, in telecoms, it's similar. Most prices, if they're important products, have to be approved by the pricing committee. But those price changes are normally backed up by a business case. And those business cases, I might put a note there, but often the business cases, the main assumption is volumes. So they assume we're going to drop the prices, but we're going to sell more. But those business cases normally do not have all the costs included. They only have part of the costs, like CPE and handsets. But to come back to one reason why telecoms is probably different than data centers, telecoms is a retail business, okay, and it's very, very competitive. So if your competitor drops their prices, often you've got no choice but to drop your prices if you want to maintain your subscribers, because it's basically telecoms is a utility. There's not that much, people don't stick so much with one operator. If they see the price is cheaper on another operator, they might just move. And if they move, they might move and stay with the other operator for years. So it's an extremely competitive market. So you can't really take that out of the picture either. But the problem is
absolutely
operators do the same thing.
And Mark,
I'm with you. I mean, it's not growing. It's not growing. The market is not growing at the same rates as some of the other markets, like data centers, for instance, and that is understandable. But then I guess the question is, if this is how industry is set up, then maybe the solution is like because well, you have to follow the others in providing these discounts. Then maybe the solution is to kind of target a different mix, or target more value-added services or something like that. Well, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm going to come on to that. Yes, yeah. I mean, pricing at the high level is just one approach, but I'm going to come on towards the end. But yeah, understanding the customer's needs, that is the more important thing. But most operators, they don't actually go down to the customer level because they've got too many customers. If you've got 10 million customers, most of the systems will not allow you to look at individual customers. So they often just do it at a very high level, often the tariff. So whatever tariff you're on with your mobile operator, often that's where they look at the profitability, and they won't go down into the individual customers to see the mix of the customers who make up those profitability details. Yeah, I better go on. We won't have time.
But I just want to mention one thing, Mark. I mean, you kind of touched on this short-term versus long-term orientation, and this is an issue that applies to a lot of other industries as well. The streaming services, social media, where their valuation, how many times do they report increasing profits, but the number of subscribers has declined and their stock price goes down. So it's sometimes the number of subscribers is taken as a proxy for future profits, and it's not, as you just indicated. So again, it's a false market mechanism, market signal. And
yeah, I mean, the market is very strange. I mean, one year it will be subscribers, and next year it will be ARPU. And ARPU is one of the better measures in telecoms because it tells you the average revenue per subscriber. And from that, it's a better way of valuing it. But the example I just gave with Vodafone, what they did by getting a lot of low-value customers back on the network, they hit the subscriber numbers, but basically they significantly reduced their ARPU. So it swings and roundabouts. The good thing with profitability is if you get it right, you can increase both. I'm going to come on to some of the reasons in a second why they don't use profitability. Let me just
Mark, maybe I'm sorry if I have another, maybe just a very short one.
No, sure, carry on. Yeah.
And I'm sorry that I cannot show my video. Somehow my camera is broken, it looks like. So question is, it sounds like you have really truly millions of subscribers. Like it's just on the surface of it sounds like this industry should be comparable to some of the other industries where you have millions of customers, consumers, like retail, for instance. And the question from that is, are finance professionals in this industry using the same techniques in kind of big data analysis on what the customers are using, how do they approach their use, et cetera, to kind of optimize the pricing, find packages and stuff like that. Is that very common?
No,
the big
it's
data
not.
use.
And I think the reason it's not, well, there's several reasons it's not common. One, a lot of the IT systems that do this profitability analysis aren't scalable to doing individual customers, because we're not talking about maybe 1 million customers often, we're talking 10 million customers. And when you're looking at the products, a product is a call. So you make a call to A, to B, to that country, to this country. You're talking products in the billions. It's just the sheer volume of it all. Most of the IT systems can't cope with it. But some operators have tried and had success at this. So, I mean, it is what I'm talking about here. It's doable, and I've done it. It's just a lot of operators don't. And in fact, a lot of operators even struggle doing basic profitability by tariff, just 100 different tariffs. They struggle with that because of the problems with the costing systems.
Okay. Yes,
so if I just come on some of the reasons they don't use it, this is the reasons they give me. The cost models are often historic, and finance, sometimes they can take up to a year to update one of these cost models. So, if we're in 2024, we're going to set prices for the rest of the year, but the cost models from 2022, they'll just say, oh, it's too old. And they've got a good point. I mean, the time finance take to update these costing models, I just, honestly, I can't understand why it takes so long, but it does seem to. And then sometimes the cost models haven't been created for the right reasons. They've been created maybe for costing for regulatory reasons. So telecoms has a lot of regulatory rules where you have to provide cost information to the regulators. And you don't always give them the true and honest picture. Sometimes it's a bit distorted depending on what the regulator wants to hear. And those models are not always suitable for pricing. I'll give you an example. This is one with broadband, right? So fiber broadband, which everyone wants, and it's changing quite quickly. Some countries now, the minimum speed is 1 gigabits per second. That's how good it's got. The strategy when we built these broadband models, because I was involved in one of these, the pricing strategy was, this is when we were looking at the investment, okay? So this is long before we ever sold any. The strategy was broadband. So we were going to sell broadband, we were going to recover all the money from broadband. So we'd roll out broadband into a particular area or a particular city, and we'd assume 50%, 80%, or whatever, took broadband, and we'd recover all our revenue from the broadband. But a lot of the costing models I've been seeing, they've allocated a lot of those costs to voice because the regulator wants coverage. They want all the houses in the country covered, and all those houses have to have a voice phone, even if you never use a voice phone. So they've allocated a lot of the costs to voice, where voice is an incremental cost on top of the broadband. When we did the pricing strategies, the rollout, we assumed there was no revenue from voice at all, zero. And yet the cost models that finance have built have got significant amounts of costs going to voice, when really from a pricing strategy, it's zero. So, I mean, what I'm making it sound like these costing models are terrible. But the good news is they're actually quite easy to change. So by just tweaking a few drivers in these cost models, it's quite easy to change one of these historic cost models that have been built for regulatory reasons into a pricing model. It's not a lot of work. People think, oh, it took them 5 years to build the costing model. It take 5 years to build a pricing one. But that's really not the case. I don't know if anyone else maybe on the chat you'd like to say if you've had problems getting profitability information. I mean, current, up-to-date profitability information. I'll carry on if anyone's got any questions, any answers on that. I'll watch out for it. Now, this will be similar with data centers as well, but typically in the telecoms, there's a lot of common costs. So whether we've got 1 million customers or 10 million customers, maybe the costs don't vary by too much. So we've got these two concepts, basically. We've got the common cost. And if we add an extra customer, then there's no extra cost. So as we add more customers, basically, the average cost to the customer goes down. So the more customers we add, the more profitable we will be. But then there's incremental costs as well. So every customer I add, we get extra costs. And this is quite important to understand when you want to look at pricing, because some pricing, you don't want to take into account the common costs. So if I'm pricing, say, for a new service, like on 5G, I might not want to include all the common costs, the historical costs that people have put into the cost model. And I just want to pick out certain costs and include those in my analysis. But most cost models don't have any measure of variability in the models. So you've got an absolute number for the cost, but there's no way of picking which of those costs to include in your analysis. And the models I normally do, we normally have these different variability measures built into the models. So if we want to do what we call the margin, profitability margin, we just exclude the common costs, depending on the pricing, if there's not going to be any incremental costs incurred. And I've got a question here is, how long are typical business cases, investment cases? Well, the broadband one I was just telling you about, originally, I think it was 20 years. But the pricing that's been done on some of the companies I've seen since, again, they've gone from a strategy when we did the investment of 20 years down to this year. And the worst example I came across was 2 years ago. And one of the marketing guys was retiring. He wanted to get the biggest bonus possible before he retired. So what he did was he built up the biggest bundles he could possibly think of to get as many customers to upgrade as possible so he'd get the biggest bonus. And basically what he did is he burnt the next 5 years worth of speed increases so he could get his bonus before he retired. And I did some rough calculations on the long-term loss to the company of that. And I reckon it was something like $500 million that he cost the company long-term, just so he could get his 1 year bonus. And the management signed off on it. I was the only one who raised concerns about it. Everyone else just signed off. So they do some crazy things. And I'm going to give an example on common costs next. I put this slide in at the last minute. And this is what we call the death spiral. Now, I've got a simple example here, which we used to do on training courses. A company has got one product, okay? They make one product, and that product is extremely profitable. So the company's really doing well, it's fine. Then the company launches a second product, but the marketing guys price it at the incremental cost. And the argument is, well, all the common costs are covered by the first product. The new product, we want to sell as many as possible. So let's just sell them at the extra cost. We'll still be profitable because all the common costs are covered by the first product. Then after a few years, the first product, the main product, becomes rather old and redundant. People stop buying it. And the only product that's left is the second product. And now suddenly the company is unprofitable, can't cover its costs, and that's the end of the company. Now, that sounds like an extreme case, but this is still happening today with telecoms companies. And I've seen this in the last couple of years. They haven't gone bankrupt because they've got multiple products. But when I looked at 2 years ago, I was responsible for, the company was, this is a telecoms company, they were losing money over So their profitability was negative. So we had to look into the company to try and find out why. And one of them was the international calls. So this is when you make an international call abroad. And basically the prices of the international calls going abroad was below the marginal cost. So when you make a call abroad, you have to pay money to the operator at the destination country to terminate that call for you. So if you're calling from America to the UK, you have to pay Vodafone, for example, to terminate that call. So every minute someone's making a call on your network, you are paying real money to that operator to terminate that call. And their international calls were below that marginal cost. So every minute people were making calls off the network, they were losing real money. This is not depreciation or common assets. This is actual cash they had to pay out every month. It's actually insane. And I said, why are you doing this? And they said, we have to because the competition does it. There are some very strange things that go on, but sometimes it's almost unavoidable. Now you could say, and I had this argument with people before, but they say, well, let's stop offering international calls. Let the competition lose all the money, and the competition will go bust. But the problem is the customers buy multiple products. So international calls might be losing money, but other products they buy might be making money. And this is another reason why you want to look at the individual customer and see if that customer is worth keeping or not. So if you've got a customer, all they're doing is making lots of international calls and not doing any other products or services, we just don't try and keep them, just make no effort to keep them at all, let them leave. But other customers who might be making lots of profitable products, keep them. And this is the challenge, I think, with telecoms. We're not looking at one product, we're looking at 20 or 30 different products and how those are all bundled together. And it's the profitability of that bundle that's the important thing. Let me just quickly check the chat here a second. Hang on. Right, I've got one here about the common costs. What happens when the customers leave? The thing to do with that really is to plan it in. Try and plan in replacement products. I'll give you one example here, and this is, again, fiber broadband. Many years ago, we all used to have copper to our homes. We used to have these terrible slow speeds of broadband to our houses. And that was based on copper or ADSL. Now it's all based on fiber, which is much, much faster. But they use most of the same common infrastructure. So the ducts, buildings, and so on, and poles have all been reused with a new product or service. And that was actually handled quite well. So there was a smooth handover from lower speed copper to a higher speed fiber, reusing the same assets. The problem is if those assets won't ever be used again, and if they still got value. And in this case, it would be all the copper that's still left in the ground. Once the copper's switched off, it's just basically just written off. So it is a tough one.
So I just want to encourage people to, if they have a question, to unmute themselves and feel free to ask.
Yeah, free flow to ask. I'm just looking at another comment here. And he says it's more about making profits from enterprises rather than consumers. Yes and no.
Hi,
often
Mark.
business.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that was
hi.
me.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, that was me, my comment. And yeah, go ahead. And then maybe I do have a question with regards to that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems strange, but when you look at mobile business customers, often they are heavily discounted. I mean, massively discounted. And they can be more unprofitable than consumers. But again, it's the mix of products. So if you've got a business customer, they might be buying 1,000 mobile lines from you, but they might also be buying quite highly valuable fixed services to connect up their buildings, and use your data centers, and other things. So again, it comes down to the mix of products they're buying. As long as the mix of products the customer is buying is profitable, that's fine. But the problem is most of the pricing isn't done necessarily at the customer level. It's done more at the tariff level.
Yeah, yeah. And just a question with regards to that. So, considering that, it's really about change and, change management these days, right? When we look at telecoms, because there's been a lot of saturation. My question would be, since, it is really a world of partnerships and really leveraging from, those partnerships. So, there's somebody who's providing like the underlying network. So if we talk about the network operators, they're providing the underlying network, and then we have the OEMs, and then there are service, software, service providers, that are also integrating their services, right, to the equation. And then when we talk about the infrastructure, there is a maintenance, and there's a certain cost that is associated to the maintenance. So my question would be that with the way that things are evolving in terms of the business landscape, how do we then leverage from these partnerships to also kind of, get the cost, to a minimum level, and maybe even have a cost distribution of sorts? Because eventually everybody's going to be leveraging from the underlying, network capabilities. So that was my question. Like, what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, a couple of answers there. One, being in the telecoms industry for a lot of years now, and actually working for an operator for the last 10 years until recently, we think we've been treated extremely unfairly. The telecoms operators built out all these massive networks, so fiber broadband, 4G, 5G, got everyone coverage so they can use their mobile phones. Who's making all the profits? Facebook,
exactly.
Google, Netflix.
I mean, I agree. And I mean, I've been associated with the telecoms for the past 19 years within the Middle East and Africa. So I totally get what you're saying. And that's exactly where the question comes in, that then when we need to, start maybe thinking of a different profitability model altogether, because eventually they're, making profitability through, the telecom operators. So then,
But what is happening? The second part of that, what has been happening is in the past, the bigger operators tried to do everything themselves, right? But what's been happening in some countries is they've been breaking them up. This happens in the UK. So you've got basically what we call a wholesale company. It's Openreach in the UK, and basically what they do is they provide the basic fixed network infrastructure, so the fiber broadband, for the country as a whole. Okay, they're allowed a fair return on that. They do not sell to retail customers. They then sell to other retail customers, including their parent company, BT, but other ones like Sky, who provide content, and Vodafone, who are mobile mainly. And they can bundle then those services in with their other offerings. So you are seeing specialization within the companies. You've also got infrastructure companies that are buying up for instance, the towers that the cell sites are on, and basically operating those, and buildings as well, non-core infrastructure. Other ones specializing in data centers, and sorry, not data centers so much, call centers. But the operator I recently left, one of their big growth areas was actually data centers. So they were focusing on trying to not just have telecom services, but get into the data center area in a big way, and to offer other IT telecom services. So telecoms operators are also trying to move into other areas as well, more profitable areas. But I mean, telecoms has become more or less a utility now. But come back to my original one. It's so unfair why Google and Facebook can make so much profit out of all this money that's been invested by the telecoms operators, but there's no real solution to that I've ever heard of. Apart from some countries have talked about taxing these big content providers and passing some of it back to the operators. But that's mostly talk, I think, at the moment. But the thing is, if you don't have good investment, especially in the developing world, in your telecoms infrastructure, it affects everything. It affects your
Absolutely.
IT,
Yep.
your whole industry, everything really, the whole
Yep.
country. And you expect them to invest in this money, but not expect them to make a decent profit.
Yeah.
And by the way, the company I mentioned earlier who's losing money, I bet that was an African country as well. And if you're losing money on your network, I mean, how can you be expected to invest?
Yep. And especially with the regions like the Middle East and Africa, we've got a lot of energy crisis. I think that's been the biggest, problem that, we have energy crisis on one hand, where we're making heavy investments on, making sure that, we have some reliable ways of providing, power, uninterrupted power to, maintain the networks. And then we also have other issues with regards to ongoing costs of the infrastructure maintenance itself. And that's where the services costing, kind of squeezes as well, with all that's going on. So I think that there is a need to, maybe have a turnaround around that, because that's what we're struggling with right now in the region. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing a job for a wholesale operator in the Middle East at the moment, and we're doing a long-term 5-year plan for them. And what we're doing with this is we're including all future investments, including coverage requirements by the government. So basically, we have to roll out to all the rural areas as part of our license. And we're including the cost of doing all of that in the long-term plan. But because it's a wholesale company, all we're allowed to do really is recover what's called the working average cost of capital. Basically, that's just a fair return on our investment, which is roughly about 10%. Whereas other companies like Google and Facebook can make thousands of percent, and that's fine. They're only allowed to make 10% investment. 10% return on their investment. Which again seems extremely unfair, and it's basically treating them like a utility. But the service they're providing is so vital to the country. Again, it just strikes me as incredibly unfair. But let me come on. So a couple of remedies for the death spiral. A lot of telecoms companies tend to think of the regulator as the enemy, because the regulator over the past 20 years has tried to reduce telecoms prices, but they can actually help you. So one thing that we have found, and we were trying to do it in this African country I was working with, is get the regulator to introduce what we call a price floor. Now, what a price floor is that no operator in the country is allowed to offer retail prices below a certain level. And that level normally is set at cost plus a fair return on investment, so like a wholesale cost, and just to stop basically the prices crashing and competition going out of control. So in that case, I found anyway the regulators can be actually very beneficial to stop this death spiral, because I mean one of their jobs is to help telecoms operators, not necessarily just slow them down and cut their profits. I mean, it's partly a historical thing. In the past, going back 20 years ago, some telecoms companies were hugely profitable, and that's why these regulators were set up, to actually try and reduce the prices to the consumer. But now that's gone over the top. And it's not only affecting Africa, but I mean, in the UK, and I know for a fact in America as well, fibre still has not been rolled out to a lot of rural areas. Not because it can't be done, it's because the operators do not have enough spare cash to actually do it. And I know in the UK especially, there are incentives from the government now. The government is actually paying operators to roll out into the rural areas, so that people living in rural areas aren't disadvantaged by not having high-speed broadband to run their businesses from home and do things like that. I expect in Africa that's a big issue as well, isn't it?
Yep.
Oh, that was a question while you were talking about Africa. We had this from the last one. Someone brought up the issue of Starlink. Are you finding people picking up and using Starlink in Africa? Or?
Don't have much information on that. I mean, I'm more linked with the services side, so it's like, the infrastructure maintenance side of things. So I'm more linked with that, and so we're working with, we're rendering them services, to maintain those network infrastructure assets, and yeah. So, but yeah, I
I
can
mean,
maybe.
the thing with Starlinks
Mm,
is for places in rural areas, it's brilliant because it's very fast and you don't have to be connected to the network.
mm,
Um, but it's hugely unprofitable from what I've been led to believe anyway. Um,
right.
so if Musk wants to sell services at a fraction of the cost, well, that's fine for everyone. But I know in Europe anyway, they're still selling it quite high price. I think it's over £100 a month or something like that. And people in Africa
Mm,
just can't afford that a
agreed.
month
Yes. Yeah.
unless you're rich. The last on the last call, it was actually someone from South Africa said some of his friends have got it, but they're probably white South Africans who got plenty of money living on their farms, not
Mm.
the poor ones who really need it.
Yeah, at least not the consumer side, but again, maybe the enterprise once they've evolved and developed. And that's where I think the cost needs to be distributed, particularly for the infrastructure maintenance, right? Because again, as I mentioned, there's energy crisis, there's infrastructure, and then we have the 5G. Like, if we speak about countries like Tanzania, and we speak of countries like even Ethiopia right now at this point, and other countries, they'll be leveraging from 5G. Those are the ambitions, and also Kenya, which is leading in terms of that. But I think, yeah, it should really come down to sharing of the costs when it comes to maintaining the infrastructure, because a lot of times what the reports that we get from the field are related to, poor infrastructure, which is, hampering the progress and services on site, because we cannot allow personnel to, render their services. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I did a project in Tanzania quite a few years ago, and
Right.
there they had to have diesel generators on every cell
Mm-hmm.
site, every
Mm-hmm.
tower, basically, to
Yeah,
make sure because the electricity wasn't reliable enough to keep the network going,
absolutely.
and then they
Yes.
had to have security guards to stop people stealing the diesel.
Yeah, because there's a lot of vandalism, and with that being said, there's vandalism as well in Africa. So there are
Yeah,
multiple things at play, and in order to maintain the network, and again, this is where again, when we're partnering with enterprise, particularly now with the 5G and the use cases of 5G, like, we're looking at the digital twin use cases. If you look at the North American market segment, and if we look at other markets like South America, the Europe, and, APAC. And so, I mean, we see those use cases. So I think, it's time that we also start discussions around this in terms of cost sharing to maintain the infrastructure, because eventually everything is relying on that infrastructure, which requires protection from vandalism, from all sorts of things. So I think, yeah, but that's really important. And then also to have the right autonomy to reduce maybe the diesel, and maybe have more reliable battery banks and stuff. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
just my
No,
thoughts.
I
Yeah,
agree. I mean, I think everyone
yeah,
in the telecoms industry would agree. And again, it comes
yeah.
down to why are Facebook and Google and everyone else allowed to make massive profits and we're not?
Yeah,
But, I better get on, otherwise I
sure.
won't.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention the next one, which is the thing called price elasticity of demand. And basically, this is one measure we use. And this basically, I just want to introduce it. And I'm going to show how we use it. Basically, this tells us how the prices, how volumes change with price. And it's a variable measure in that it's the change in volume over the change in price. So, for example, if I reduce my prices by 50%, and if I can double my sales, so I half my prices, I double my sales, so my revenue stays the same. And that's a price elasticity of 1. The problem with that is that the revenue stays the same, but I double my volumes. So my prices don't double because I got my common costs, but my costs do go up. So a lot of people use this and say, oh, well, it's got elasticity of 1, it's fine. But they seem to forget that the profitability goes down. And the next biggest one, and this comes onto your 5G maybe, is dealing with spare capacity. And this has been a big argument for many years. When you introduce a new product or service like 5G, for example, the initial setup costs are huge because you have to basically get national coverage, put towers everywhere, antennas everywhere. But at the start, you don't have many customers. So if you do your profitability at the beginning of a new service, and I've got Starlink here and 5G, fully allocated cost models will just give you nonsense numbers. So I've got an example here is most of the costs are treated with accounting depreciation, which is flat line. So you take your 5G and you depreciate it over 10 years or something, 15 years. And then you set your prices. But if you do your profitability at the beginning, you don't have much volume. So the unit cost will be through the absolute roof. So your profitability might not be break even until maybe year 2 or something here. So this is another reason why you need some sort of long-term strategy about your pricing, because you need to recover these costs over time. And this spare capacity is a big issue, which a lot of cost models really struggle with. And another reason why people or marketing people will not use these for pricing. And there's several ways to deal with spare capacity when you look at pricing. The first one, which has been suggested by economic consultants, but it's mostly discredited, but you might come across it. It's called economic depreciation. Now, economic depreciation is not like traditional financial depreciation. Basically, if you've got the graph down here, instead of doing flat line depreciation, that is, depreciate the same amount of the asset over the life of the asset, you depreciate it based on a curve. And that curve basically tries to maintain the same unit cost over the life of the asset. But when your asset is 15 years old, going to last 15 years, your investment, getting the forecasting, the volumes right, that is incredibly difficult. And it's been proven to be quite unreliable over the long term. So in the first couple of years, it's okay. But when you go back and look at it historically, it's not been proved to be very reliable. But there is a quick fix that I use. And this approach is to treat spare capacity as a dummy product. Now, this has got lots of advantages in that your profitability and your costs will reconcile to your financial accounts. So your management, CFO, and that will recognize the numbers. But basically what you do is you say, this year, 90% of my 5G is not being used. Okay, so what I do is I take that 90% of the assets, the common assets, out of the equation, and I just create a dummy product called spare capacity. And I take those costs, those common costs, to the spare capacity product. And I put that in my P&L reporting as a line. So it doesn't look very good. You've got this massive cost, but there's no profit for it because it's got no revenue. And the way I try and explain this to management is it's a lost revenue opportunity. You've got this cost, but you're not utilizing it. And it's rather like hotels, if you like, or aeroplane seats. If I was running a hotel, if I were to say to you, there's only 3 people staying in the hotel, so we're going to charge you more because the hotel's almost empty. It's just insane. But in telecoms, this is the sort of idea that a lot of finance people have, that if not many people are using the service in the short term, then we're going to charge them more for that service. But it's nonsense, really. So this approach, basically taking out the cost and then reporting it to management and saying, look, we've got this cost, but we're not utilizing it. Let's do something with it. It highlights it. Whereas what most profitability models do is they hide this cost. So what they do is they spread this cost across all products and services. So you don't see this big red line, which makes some people happy, but it just messes up the pricing, basically. So this is a quick fix that I find works quite well. And it's very quick to add to existing cost models as well. You just need to know how much spare capacity is this year, how much next year, and just take that cost out of the equation.
There's a comment that from Steve here that for a manufacturing company, he classifies this as just the cost of unused capacity. And that's consistent with what we in PACE in our ebooks suggest that be done.
Oh, okay, right. That's good. Oh, that's consistent. I've been doing this for years and years, but in telecoms, I'm the only person I've seen that's actually ever used this, because people don't like seeing these big red lines. They say, why aren't we selling the spare capacity? We just have to give them the story that, you know, we're going to sell it, but it takes time. So it's good that other industries are doing that as well.
Mark, is a use of the EBITDA or EBITDA or whatever it is called in the telecom, is that not the solution then? Like, you know, when you just take out the depreciation for the current period, and then you say, well, you know, basically you look at EBITDA and then you relate to the investment, and then you see whether you are making the whatever ROI on your investments as per plan, and then you can explain it.
Yes, so that helps. Yeah, you take almost all P&Ls have an EBITDA line as well. So you've got it before depreciation and after depreciation. But the depreciation is taking out one of the fixed costs, but it takes out all of them in one go. Some of your assets, some of your common assets might be being utilized, and you want to include them in your analysis. And the EBITDA takes them all out, basically. So if you were to do it, EBITDA, I mean, it's going to look hugely profitable, the company, at that level. But then when you look at the bottom line, you know, including depreciation, it could be hugely unprofitable. It's just too high level, really. But all profitability P&L reports we do have that as well. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And maybe I'm sorry, I see that time is a bit short, but when you do these investment business cases, and then you say, well, this is the plan that we have, like, you know, we'll sell this year so much, this year so much, this year so much, etc. You know, cost is included, investment is included. I mean, if you just provide, you know, this update versus the investment business case, and they say, well, I'm in my year one, and this is what we were supposed to deliver, this is what we are delivering. Is that not a solution in reporting to the management?
Yes, it is, but I've never seen anyone do it. I mean, I've worked on these business cases, and then you come back a couple of years later, and then you've got finance and marketing doing completely different things than were in the original business case. Honestly, it doesn't make any sense to me. But you've got to remember, telecoms is a complicated business, so you've got lots of different business cases for lots of different reasons, and to try and keep track of them all is very difficult. I think a lot of it comes down to technology again. You know, all these business cases are now done in Excel to combine all the different business cases. I did a job of one operator. We took all the business cases for 1 year. We said, well, if they all came true, what would the revenues be this year? And it was like double what the actual revenues were, because almost every business case assumed aggressive volumes, which didn't come true. And the second
sounds very familiar.
On a later slide is they don't track the business. They don't track the promotions and business cases after they've done them. So they'll do one business case. They'll do next month. They'll do 3 months later. They'll do another one, and they don't go back to see if the first one was true or not. They just keep compounding the same problems.
Yeah, we have the same issue, and I think the issue is to a large extent, you know, what you just mentioned, because it is Excel. It is very difficult to track how, you know, the current performance compares to the business case, because it's all Excel. It's a lot of manual work that needs to be done. But, you know, the way we approached that was to, you know, really, you know, make this effort and just go back to these business cases and make somebody responsible for delivering the business cases. So somebody like
it's good to hear someone does. What industry are you in?
In data centers. That's
in what? Sorry, yeah.
Data centers.
Oh, sorry, data centers again. Sorry, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, you've probably got a few products and not so many customers. Maybe it's easier, but
true.
The thing is, it's doable, right? If you were to put systems in place, these big IT systems can easily track lots of different business cases. All the promotions, for example, who took up those promotions, what customers took them up, and what the sales, what the volumes those customers use. All the data's there. It's just there's too much data for most systems to be able to manage, and the companies just haven't invested in the IT systems needed to track all this data until now.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think more companies are thinking about it. I think, but I mean, it's a doable problem. The things I think Gary said something the last thing about this, that a lot of accountants are still living in the 1970s. I mean, there's some of them still struggle with Excel. Let me just go on. Running almost out of time. So what I've got here is, and I'm working on this at the moment, is forecasts look better. And this is all coming on to what you say. So don't just look at profitability this year, but look at the profitability, what we're going to be looking like in 5 years or 2 years, basically combining all the business cases together into one consistent model and one consistent set of prices. But you need to have the system in place to be able to do this. And the hard thing here is that the prices affect the volume. So if you change the prices, the volumes change. And the revenues are dependent on the prices and the volumes, so they change. And then the costs are dependent on the volumes. So it's like a circular loop, an iteration. That as quickly as you change the prices, everything else changes. So unless your cost model is quite dynamic, which most of them aren't, most of them are updated once a year or something, they just can't keep up with this. So the revenue side is fine. That's done through billing. And billing tracks every single customer. What lets us down is the cost side of the problem.
I did want to say, I asked 3 questions in the chat for everyone because we only have a couple of minutes left. I wanted to ask if another meeting in, say, 3 weeks would be helpful. Is this format helpful to you? And where are you listening from? So you can just, speak now or make sure you answer in the chat, because it'd be helpful to know these questions, the answers to these questions, in planning our future activities.
Yeah, I missed a couple of comments. I'm just looking at one here. One interesting one is, isn't product profitability misleading? And I was just going to come on to that. Yes. I think it is, to be honest, and some of the more advanced operators now are looking at individual customer profitability. So not just only purely products, but customers, is the customer profitability. And that's, I think, where we need to be heading to. The problem is just the sheer volumes of managing this. So yes, exactly. One customer might be profitable with one product and another customer might not be. And that is the fact. And it's always been the case. Yeah. I think I've got an example of that. Yeah. So one of the more advanced ways you can use this profitability is actually segmenting your customers based on profitability. So you segment your customers the traditional way, by age, by demographics, by the products they buy, the product mix or whatever. Once you've done that segmentation, then if you segment them again, instead of just by revenue, but by profitability, what you can do is you can identify segments of customers who might be in all the traditional same segments, same products, same age, same locations, but one group's profitable and one group's not profitable. And if you have the individual customer level details, then you've got a chance of finding out, well, why is one customer more profitable than another? And if you can do that, then you can try and change those customers' behavior, either sell them different products or encourage different behavior, and so on, and try and increase it at the actual individual customer level. So that comment's dead on, exactly, in banking. Yeah, we're trying to do the same things in telecoms. It's just, with tens of millions of customers, trillions or billions of product transactions and things, just the IT systems are letting us down. That's the only thing that's stopping it, not the modeling. If the systems could do it, I think we would as well. And I have done this for customers, so it has been done. It's just that most of them don't really do that. Just looking at questions. Right, just come on for Toby's one. I just want one last slide, I think.
So we only have about a minute left, Mark. So
yeah, okay, yeah, that's good timing then. Yeah. So again, if you can identify the customers that are not profitable, and if you can compare them with the customers who are profitable, and then they're in the same segment, so there must be something different about them. If you can find out what that difference is, then you can target those customers to try and change their behavior. If you do not know what those customers are, and often the operators don't, they'll target a campaign at everyone. So they'll offer everyone, say, a new iPhone to try and encourage them to stay or to use new services, which is hugely costly, costs a huge amount of money. But if you know which customers are unprofitable, then you can do directed marketing at only those customers. So offer those customers who are unprofitable something to change them, to make them more profitable. And that might be offering them, a new iPhone or something, or whatever's needed. But don't do broad brush marketing campaigns and give away loads of costly things to everyone. You need to target the customers. And to do that, you need to know which customers you need to target. And that's really what the objective we've been trying to do on some of the jobs I've been doing, is to actually try and find out who these customers are and target these individual customers. And if you can do the profitability by customer, which is a challenge, then I think that's the way forward in the future.
Okay, and I think we
So
have
back to you.
I think we have to wrap it up with that great thought. Again, another exciting session. I mean, this is like just so interesting, and looking forward to our next session in 3 weeks. Thanks for everyone for your comments. Mark, thanks for an amazing presentation. And I think this is such great content we're talking about. So with having said that, see everyone again in 3 weeks. And again, thank you, Mark.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mark. It was really engaging and insightful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your feedback. It's good. Yeah,
Thank you, Mark.
That's
Hey,
what we're
thanks,
trying
Mark.
to do.
This
Get
is-
everyone
This is
discussing.
Gary Kokens. Thanks, Mark. Good presentation.
Oh, Gary, hi there. Thanks for attending.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.